Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we explore the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. In this, our 5th season, we are looking at Joe Johnston's 2011 film Captain America, The First Avenger. I'm Andy Nelson from the Next Reel Film Podcast.
And I'm Pete Wright, and I'm here to document the further adventures of the blue lens flare.
Today we are talking about minute 61, which begins with Cap sneaking into the factory floor and ends with Dum Dum Dugan's casually racist question. Joining us on the show today, it's a blast from the past. Matthew Fox from last season looking at Thor, back in the house. Hello, Matthew.
Hey, good to be back here.
Glad to have you.
I thought you'd quit on Marvel, Matthew. What a relief.
I still love Marvel, and you still keep picking me for movies that I don't really like. So we'll have a lot of fun with this one.
Well, this will be great then. We are finally cresting the 1 hour mark, moving into minute 61. We are looking at a moment here as Steve, he's now sneaking into the factory floor here, kind of creeping around, moving past boxes of these old explosives, seeing all the new bombs, all this good stuff. Let's start with Steve, though. Steve Rogers, Captain America. What do you think of the way the character is portrayed in this film up to this point, Matthew? And also, like, what do you think of what they've done with kind of this outfit look for him?
I'll try to keep this brief. This is kind of my overall thoughts on the Captain in this movie and beyond. Because I made a joke about not liking this movie, and that's not entirely true. To me, this movie is a great example of how much context matters. Because the first time I wasn't interested when this movie came out. The character just seemed rah-rah patriotism, not my thing. I didn't read the comics. I know, horrible sinner. I watched the Avengers movie, and I was now very curious about Captain America. Went back and watched the movie and was like, okay, he's the rah-rah America guy. That's fine. Then as the character developed more and more, I came to realize, okay, this isn't a standalone story. This is the first chapter. This is that we have to establish that he is rah-rah America, but he's rah-rah the American values of, don't let people be bullies and stand up for what's right. Values that in the MCU and in our own world are not always lived up to. And so I feel like this movie makes his turns in movies like Civil War and all the rest of them, and Winter Soldier, where he has to start questioning the people above him and asking some of those harder questions, much more powerful. So I feel like if it was just this, I would not like this character very much. I would like him a lot more than Surfer Cap, who we talked about a couple months ago.
That was a highlight of your Marvel podcasting career, I think is what you meant to say.
Thank you. I put that up there with the funny thing happened on the way to the forum song, right. Which I apologize. Anyone have to go back and listen to because I don't know what I'm talking about. But yeah, I am. So yeah, in terms of his costume, I'm not the most visually attuned of people. I do like though that it looks kind of ridiculous. It looks like what someone in the 1940s would sew together, and it does make the later uniforms he gets. I don't like that they kind of go the Zack Snyder route of like, let's dull all the colors and darken it a little bit in later stuff. But I do quite like this. It looks silly but it's corny, and that I feel like is kind of the point. And that the fact that the others look at him with just the sense of like, what are you doing, man? It's kind of nice, It's that kind of like, the person who just like, they always stop to help the old lady across the street, or they always make sure to tip the way everyone should. But, the other people look at him and go, why are you still being the nice guy? It's corny, it's hokey, but it's the right thing to do. And I like that about this Cap.
And the costume works well in context of the theater or the stage, the performances that he had been doing. And now putting the bomber jacket over it and the helmet and stuff, it's a fun way to kind of, as we've kind of talked about, it's very much a transitional look for him, kind of going from the one to the other. Yeah.
I do need to say, as someone who has now been a professional fundraiser for a lot of causes, selling bonds is a very important part of the war effort. And I think the movie is wrong to completely denigrate that. I get it's not what he wants to do, but I just got to say, bonds buy bullets and bullets kill Nazis. So
it was good Steve was doing. He wasn't just collecting scrap metal like Timmy. And even then, Timmy collecting scrap metal was still a value. It all
scrap
is a
metal
value.
Builds tanks.
It's just Steve's perception of it. And that's an interesting element of all of this is Steve views himself as somebody who should be doing more, but only thinks that it's really the work of the troops over there actually fighting the Nazis that's the real work. Collecting scrap metal, performing at the USO shows to sell bonds. He doesn't view that as, I guess he views it as important, but not the sort of thing he should be doing.
Right.
Well, it also shows kind of an immaturity in Cap, right? That he still has, like, we see Captain America as like this selfless avatar of, truth, justice, and honor. And yet he's still, even here, holding the blue glow ammo clips, an immature sort of young man. And he has a lot of growing to do. And I think that's an important bit of awareness. And also a great nod to the good work of the USO. Bonds by bullets.
Well, and some could say, Steve got his most important, valuable training during the USO tour. That's right. That's where he punches Hitler over 200 times.
So many times.
You're just like knocking off all the rants I wanted to go on to with this movie, because we have a lot of talk in fandom these days about the Mary Sue characters and, Rey never learned how to use a lightsaber, or She-Hulk doesn't know how to fight. Can you show me when Steve Rogers learned to fire a gun?
Yeah.
Or learned how to sneak into a building? Or learned how to throw a punch? He's good at taking a punch. The punch he throws in that first fight scene is awful. He doesn't know how to fight. There's no training montage. All I'm saying is I don't think we need the training montage. We can assume it happens. But it just is – it's a little funny to me because there is that – if it's a female character, there's always the how did she learn to do this? We never get that with Cap. I don't think we think about it. But
you don't think it's enough that we have the military montage with him? He learns to run and, knock down poles.
He doesn't learn how to do anything. We see him fail on everything.
We see him fail a lot.
And the pole is the one good thing because that shows that he has a better kind of thinking than a lot of the other soldiers. He's good at nonlinear thinking, which is great.
But he wasn't trained to do that there. He brought that to the scenario, right?
Sure. But that's not a military skill.
No,
exactly. Exactly.
And we've talked about this a bit over the various seasons and how in so many ways through these later Marvel films, once a person becomes kind of the superhero, it seems like the fact that they've become the superhero means that they know how to be a superhero now. And it all kind of stems from us having had a montage of Tony as he's like learning and training to build the suits. Once he has done that, like we never need to see Rhodey learn how to use a suit. Everything after Tony's training montage means pretty much all the rest of the heroes in the MCU now know how to handle their skills once they get it. It's a frustrating element. And I suppose it's just kind of a shorthand Marvel way of saying, once they're a superhero, they now essentially have internally gone through their own training montage. It's nonsense, but yes.
And that's the thing is I don't mind it in these movies. I just want to point out because right now we're talking for the last 20 years, we've been at this point in fandom where if it's a woman character, if it's a character of color, suddenly people care about that. And I just like pointing out that because I think you put it perfectly. There is a reason why we don't get those training montages for most characters of any gender or of any background. And it just I always like to point out the hypocrisy of that because it's very funny to me. The serum makes him super strong and super capable, but it doesn't give him 5 extra points for skills. It's just attributes. It's just +4 strength, +4 dexterity, +8 stamina.
Well, it also doesn't teach him how to sneak around. And as we're going to talk about, not in this minute, but later this week, why is it that he now thinks he can handle everything by himself, and it's
right.
Definitely an interesting element with this character. And we'll certainly talk about it.
And I will say in fairness, Hydra security is not so good that it makes me think you need the best sneaking skills. They apparently think that having one guard on the level above the prisoners is enough, but fair enough.
I have a lot of questions about this because when we last saw this factory floor, now granted, there was a lot of work happening here, so there were a lot of people. Now, there are a few guards we see as Steve kind of sneaks from one row of bombs to another, but they're all in the background. And as we've seen in this film and many, many other films, peripheral vision, it's not really a thing. Nobody can see anything if they're not looking directly at it. Steve sneaks past people who probably would notice somebody moving. But It is what it is.
Well, and it's triply frustrating right here because you would think these bombs and the blue glow ammo and all the things, this is what they're producing at this facility, right? Aren't these sort of the family jewels? Wouldn't they want to protect them more than, the average, manufacturing facility? It just feels significant that he has enough time to look at this.
I totally agree there, but also maybe station one guard outside the cell with like 50 prisoners.
Right. Do a little more work there. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's, the whole thing. I mean, before we get to the prison, just, one other note about kind of the factory here is that we just, a few minutes ago saw Schmidt tell Zola, boost production by 60%, which makes me think we want this going, 24 hours around the clock. I want people here working to really crank out more of this stuff. And now we're at this point where, because Zola was just like, but the men aren't going to be able to handle it. And Schmidt's like, yeah, we can always get more men. And now it's like, okay, but not tonight. Let's just put them all to bed tonight. They can rest up, and we can do it all in the morning. It's weird to me that but we still do it 9 to 5. We're not monsters.
Just 60% more people in
Europe has much better worker conditions than the United States does. We know that. They have better labor unions, better organizing laws, even for the worker slaves, the kidnapped people. I agree. It's ridiculous.
Hydra still respects that. Yeah, no, it's something. It is something for sure. I do want to just comment real quick. So Pete, you mentioned this blue, the Tesseract internal components of the bomb that Steve comes across. We had talked about, are these part of the bombs? Are these part of like the turbines for the planes? It is, as it is in the script, as it's a cluster of cartridges that go into these bombs. So it is definitely something for the bomb. And it is kind of cool to see like the bomb shells, the casings, the internal pieces of the bombs, all kind of in these rows and everything with serial numbers. Who knows what the coding means, but there is some interesting sort of serial numbering on them. So I like that, again, they're setting up a world-building scope for us. We are seeing this massive factory there producing massive quantities of weapons that we haven't even seen them use yet. Like, we've only seen the tank, we've seen guns and stuff. We haven't seen anything with these bombs. So it's interesting. We're getting some great setup for something that is going to be coming at some point later in the film. And so I like that. I like seeing that. But to that point, I also will have questions about Schmidt's plans later in the week. But at this point, yes. So Steve is sneaking around the factory, and he makes it to the prison. Matthew, you've pointed out this multi-level prison, how you've got the guard up on top, just the sole guard watching the prisoners up on top, and all the prisoners in the cages down below. I will say one thing that I really like about this, and I wanted to get the perspective from the two of you. It's kind of this nice way to show Steve's arrival. And I think this is a sort of moment that works well when you have Johnston directing. You see from below, you see a guard through kind of the grate in the floor as he's walking. And then as he passes toward the other grate, you just hear a noise. And then he actually falls onto the grate. And kind of letting us know, Steve has arrived. How does that play for the two of you as far as like the way that we see Steve arriving here and finding the prisoners finally?
The important part here, because there is so much to complain about in terms of how it's blocked, is I have to shout out how fun and awesome the production design is. I love the 2-level design. I love the soldiers that looks like they are hanging down below this floor. I think the only thing that would make it better is if they actually had to, climb out, right? Because at this point they walk out the giant gates on the lower level. I think it'd be really cool if there was just no escape other than up. That would make it to me a better design, a more interesting design. But I love the fact that it looks like they're hanging down below. I think that's very, very cool. Even though it's probably not the most efficient use of space for a prison, having circular like cartons of of prisoners hanging down. That is very cool. I also think the reveal of guards falling down, such an awesome sort of, it's a Spielberg reveal, right? It just feels like this thing's going to happen, and then you get to see why it happened. And that, I think, is really great. I think it's really great. And then we get Captain America still in his rube stage, peeking his head over. Captain America, right? I think that's just really neat. I think it's all really neat.
I think that's a good way to put it. I definitely was pretty stuck on the this makes no sense aspect.
Yeah.
But like the charitable reading I can give of this is that this isn't a prison. This is a factory. And Schmidt is clearly not a person who wants to take prisoners. He's going to kill everybody on the other side. He's going to kill half the people on his own side. Like, this is not a preserve life kind of person. And so I get the idea of like, he's only taking prisoners because Zola's telling him that he needs more workers. So, okay, this whole place wasn't set up to hold prisoners, therefore it's not really designed and no one's thinking about it that way. I think I'm being very charitable to the director to say all that, but I think that's a way you can read it, and that way it does make sense. And I do especially think the idea of the way you said the soldiers dropping, because I have to admit, I didn't see that the first time I saw this movie. I was the only one who watched this movie in detail that I noticed it. And I think that's somewhat intentional. Because I think like you're supposed to get some idea of what's happening, but it's off screen. And the reason I say that is because Captain America, part of the whole point is he's not the sneak around guy, really. He's supposed to be, charge headfirst, into the machine guns. Like, I am Captain America. I am strong. I am powerful. And I think it's intentional that they want to show you that he can sneak when he needs to, but he's not James Bond. He's not a super spy. He's not a secret agent. He's a super powerful, strong guy. And so I think it's a really interesting directorial choice to show that happening, but like you don't actually see Steve do it. You don't see Steve sneak up on the guy and punch him or like knock him out, or honestly, what would probably be happen here is break his neck, which we don't want to see because he's our hero. And you're not supposed to kill people who don't know you're there yet. So I think it's a very interesting choice, I think, to make it happen, but like just barely on screen.
You remind me of something, back to the production design. I think that's a really astute point that this is a factory first, because then looking at the circular drop-in cages, it feels like repurposed from like some sort of canisters or silos that would have been there to hold something, right? Some sort of material that goes into the manufacturing process. I think, again, your charitable reading completely intact, like that makes the cages repurposed as cages make more sense to me.
Yeah, there's really so little logic to it because, if you're storing, if you're holding, it looks like maybe 4 soldiers per kind of per section. We only see the 4 in this particular unit. That's not very efficient. It seems like if they just maybe caged off the whole thing, they could basically make a place that holds all of them and not have to worry about this strange way of kind of managing the soldiers. It's a very odd structure that they have here. And I'm not exactly sure. I agree. I don't know really. I don't know how to read it as far as the intentions of any of this design.
And I will also say, and here I'm annoyed at you two because you make me look at movies I don't really like and find hidden meanings in them that I didn't expect to see. And we'll talk more about this in tomorrow's minute. But one of the ideas that we've had about Schmidt from the beginning is he sees people as like, he's not a Nazi and that he doesn't care about Jews or Roma or anything like that. But he does have a very sort of Nazi idea of like, there are the superior people and then all the inferior people. And he certainly thinks that these Americans are the inferior people. And so I can also see the idea that he would have so much contempt for them that the idea that they would try to escape or even be successful when he has all these great weapons is just so out of the realm of possibility that it's not worth taking precautions against. And we'll talk, because I think he shows some of that in the next minute that we'll get to. But I think that's another way to maybe read into this, that it's just like, yeah, they just don't care.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Like rest all the Hydra soldiers right now, because one Hydra soldier with one of these Tesseract weapons can likely hold back the entire, if there was an uprising of these prisoners in the cell area, like this person up above could probably handle it. They're not going to, at least per Schmidt, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's something to that as far as the way that Schmidt sees all of this.
Well, and it's important because, I think cementing the way he sees all this is that he's not shy about equipping everyone with the blue glow Tesseract guns. That's what we're about to see is just a real horrorscape of blue glow Tesseract shots and their sort of lack of restraint. At this point, Schmidt's done being restrained.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And to your comment at the beginning of the minute, Pete, yes. I mean, we're getting plenty of lens flare with all of the blue glow. Every time we get the blue glow, we're getting more lens flare. So just
outstanding. I say that in heavy quotes.
Yeah.
What did I say earlier about Snyder in inspired ideas about the atmosphere, about the uniform? Well,
right. There it is. Question for the two of you. We're slowly building the Howling Commando team here. We have Derek Luke as Gabe Jones here, who delivers a line to Steve. He's the one who asks, who are you supposed to be? So we saw earlier in the film a soldier in the field reading one of that Captain America comic. So do we think that these troops don't know who Captain America is? Is there a reason that they, or is it just like that context shock of seeing a person that they've seen, selling war bonds in movie magazines, in films, suddenly showing up to save them? Is it more the context shock of the fact that this person who has only been kind of an actor on screen or in comics is suddenly now standing before them?
I think it's a little of both, because I think some of it is all they're seeing is this newsreel footage and photos and stuff like that. And so they probably don't actually believe that he is the super soldier. They think it's just, okay, that picture of him holding up the motorcycle. Yeah, Hollywood can do whatever. So I think there's some of that. I also think as the USO tour scene really helped to establish, a lot of them just aren't paying attention to this stuff back home. And if they are, they don't care, because they kind of see him as an insult. I mean, they have bought into that mentality. The mentality he has of the real fighting is with the men and getting sweaty and shot. That they have that mentality even more so of this guy's just wearing his Tinkerbell in the boots. And so I think that's the thing is they probably heard about Captain America once or twice, made some jokes about it in the barracks, and then promptly forgot about it.
This is, I think, a really important point and a really important reason Captain America becomes successful as Captain America is that the first time these other soldiers meet him in the flesh, he immediately challenges perceptions of Tinkerbell in the boots. Immediately, they get to see him as a leader of soldiers, right? As a leader of people on the battlefield. That's what this escape represents, and that's why we're going to see him achieve a greater degree of success almost immediately, I think, at least is the case that Johnson's building, that he's earns the moniker of Captain America, even his, sort of radical rise from private to captain. It becomes an earned thing.
And that, I think, is so essential coming after Tony Stark. Because if Tony was doing this, what Cap does is he walks the walk without trying to talk the talk. He doesn't say, what do you mean you haven't heard of me? I'm Captain America. Look what I'm about to do. Which Tony Stark would absolutely do. If it was Iron Man who came over and people were like, Iron Man, really? He'd be like, here's my business card. You watch my YouTube video while I go stomp these Nazis for you. And I think the contrast there is really powerful, that Captain America he's not doing this because it bothers him that people call him, Tinkerbell boots. He's doing it because he wants to save them. What they think of him is just utterly out of his head.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Let's talk a little bit about, so we have two people. So Gabe Jones and Falsworth both respond to Steve. Interestingly, in the movie, when Gabe Jones says, who are you supposed to be? Steve says, I'm Captain America. And then Falsworth says, beg your pardon? In the script, it's actually Dernier who says mad when he says, which actually makes me think that he at least had heard of Captain America. But funny little side note there.
Right.
But we're going to slowly work through these the IMDb game with these Howling Commandos over the course of the week when they each kind of have a moment. So we're going to start with Gabe Jones. We did Dum Dum Dugan last week. Gabe Jones, Derek Luke. So he's been in a number of films, but for the two of you, what would you say are the 4 films that IMDb says Derek Luke is known for? Any ideas?
I'm awful with character names. Which one of the commandos is he? Is he the one who says, who kind of expresses disdain at the idea that it's Captain America?
No, he says, "Who are you supposed to be?" Yeah, so he's the first one who speaks.
Okay.
We've got a group of there's an African American, there's the Frenchman, the British man, the Asian American, and then Dum Dum Dugan, who's I guess the Irish American.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, Andy, this is a really hard one. I don't have anything else on the tip of my tongue for him besides this.
I would say Law and Order because everyone's in Law and Order at some point or time, but that's all I got.
Just to throw it out there. He definitely has been in, what is the TV show that he did a lot of? Empire? He's been in a number of TV things like Trauma, Empire, Rogue, The Americans, 13 Reasons Why, The Purge.
The Americans.
Yeah, so he's done a lot of TV, but it's movies where he mostly is keeping busy. And I will say the IMDb known for are 4 of his movies. The first one is where he came to be known, and that is when Denzel Washington cast him as Antoine Fisher in the film Antoine Fisher.
Oh, for crying out loud.
That is his number 1. Second is the basketball film that he did, Glory Road, where he is one of the players on the team there. Third up is this film, Captain America: The First Avenger. Last but not least is Notorious, in which he plays Sean Puffy Combs. So,
okay, all right, that was a long time ago. Notorious.
So those are
not in heavy rotation.
Not in heavy
here.
rotation. No. J.J. Field plays James Montgomery Falsworth, potentially known as Union Jack, even though it's never completely called out. But anyway, I don't know if either of you know him very much. He is, interestingly, he's born in Boulder, Colorado. So that's interesting, Pete.
Fancy.
He's one of those character actors who, like, I know I've seen him deliver 1 or 2 funny lines in half a dozen things.
Yeah.
And with a gun to my head, I couldn't tell you what any of them are.
Yeah, he's a lot of TV, 29 credits, most recently in Lost in Space. He was the new Lost in Space. But his IMDb known for are this film. He did Centurion, which was the film of the Romans in England that Michael Fassbender was in, the Neil Marshall film. Yeah, so he did that. He was in Austenland. I think that was the rom-com. And then he was in Professor Marston and the Wonder Women.
Oh, who was that? That's the first of any of the movies you've named that I've seen for either of these people. Who did he play in that?
He plays Charles Guyette, if that helps at all.
I have a vague memory of him in that movie, and so it's a fantastic movie, by the way. But
I've heard good things about that one. Most recently, he was in Ford v Ferrari.
Oh, yeah, picture him in that.
So those are the 2 from the Howling Commandos we're going to talk about today. Gabe Jones from the Howling Commandos. He first appeared along with Dum Dum Dugan in the very first issue of Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos. So he has been around for a while. Falsworth is actually not a member of the Howling Commandos. I guess they're kind of doing it here just to kind of get a wider swath of people in it. He actually, in the comics, is Union Jack. He's a British agent during World War II, created in the 70s as part of the Invaders. They are a team of the heroes that actually included Captain America and Bucky. He first appeared in The Invaders #7 back in July 76, created by Roy Thomas and Frank Robbins. I guess they wanted to kind of, make a nod to the Invaders, so they included him here again. They don't call him Union Jack, but they kind of design his outfit to look like he's kind of got that the flag on his shirt, kind of, or at least kind of the cross, the shape of the cross on his shirt. So. And
I'll admit I'm surprised at that, because if there's a move that has Stan Lee written all over it, we have an English character. Falstaff is a kind of English name that a lot of people know.
Falsworth.
Well, that's my point.
Falstaff. I gotcha.
To me, those sound similar enough that it's like it's a very Stan Lee thing to name the character that as a reference to Falstaff, because that's a Shakespearean character people have heard of. So I'm kind of amazed that's not the case here.
Sure.
Oh, yeah. Interesting. It's a good point, actually. So anyway, I think that's it. We kind of get to the end with, Dum Dum Dugan being Dum Dum Dugan and saying something that's, pretty crass. I suppose it reflects the racist views of the time, though. But, he seems to comment they seem, I don't know, the way that it plays, it seems like their little cage is the last one that Steve unlocks. And as they step out, they see that there's a whole lot of troops kind of already gathered outside of the cages where Steve is. And this is where Dum Dum Dugan notices Jim Morita, played by Kenneth Choi. We'll talk about him in tomorrow's minute a little bit more. And Dum Dum Dugan has a line that he says that reflects his views of the time, which aren't that savory these days, but sadly still exist. How does that play for you as far as like Dum Dum Dugan and throwing this line in here?
I think it is a heavy-handed moment, but incredibly needed, because to me, one of the things that I think is really essential to Captain America is exactly this, that he stands for all Americans. He stands this is like Jack Kirby created this character because he wanted someone to punch Hitler before America had gotten into World War II. He is very much supposed to be the whole idea of how the actual American ideals of racism and sexism and all this kind of stuff stands in opposition to the ideals that America claims to be in favor of, which I think there's some truth to. And Captain America is supposed to fight for those ideals. And a lot of the early Captain America comics are about him kind of challenging racism and anti-Semitism and things like that in people who are claiming to be part of America and And so to me, it's a heavy-handed moment. And as is the sort of the Howling Commandos kind of checks off every box of diversity. But I think it's needed because to me, it's an essential part of the Captain America character is that he stands for all Americans. And as we'll see in the next minute, the response is very much part of that same this guy's from Fresno. He's not a foreign. And I don't think he would care if he wasn't. But the fact that Captain America wants to rescue him before even knowing if he's from Fresno or where he's from, it's hey, you're Americans. You were captured fighting for America. So I care about you. You're all coming with me.
That is a nice bit of consistency across the entire movie and Cap's role in the franchise. I don't like bullies. I don't care where they come from. Well, the inverse is also true.
I think a lot of this is a something that we need for the Howling Commandos as a team themselves to show that they're recognizing their differences on the outside, but they're going to find their commonalities on the inside, and that's I think going to draw them together as we kind of continue watching them throughout the film. I mean, they become a team. They really do become kind of this group of people helping on these missions. And I think that is a key element. And while here we may see that Dum Dum Dugan has some views of the world, we're going to find that actually, he comes to respect Morita and not have issues with him and fight side by side with him. And so I think there's a key element to that as well that we're getting here with reflecting with Dum Dum's character.
And I think that's a really essential point that I hadn't thought of because to me, again, here's my selling war bonds matters to the war. One person punching, no matter how good they are at punching and throwing a shield, is not going to defeat an army. It's just not how it works. And I think one of the things we've seen over the movies is that probably Cap's biggest superpower is inspiration. He can throw great punches, he can take a punch, he can throw a shield, but he's the one who can bring the team together.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly what we're seeing is that the Howling Commandos become a team because of Cap. And because Cap sees the goodness in all of them, they can all see it in each other. And so, again, maybe I have to give Johnson more credit here, or maybe I'm just headcanoning like crazy. But either way, I think that scene is a very essential part of what makes Cap Cap.
Yeah.
You see what's happening here, Andy? Matthew's going to be an unabashed fan of this movie at the end of the
5 minutes.
More what I see happening is Andy keeps trying to end the episode, and I keep going into tangents, as predicted.
But that is the end of our minute. So we will be back tomorrow to kind of find out what Morita says in his reply. We've kind of already said it, but we will talk more about the response that he has for Dum Dum Dugan. Matthew, tell everybody what you're up to, where they can tune into you now that you're done with Thor and you've washed your hands of that season.
No, I got to say, I'm not done with Thor. I wound up actually, I don't know if you've seen the most recent movie. Well, actually, Andy, I know you and I did an episode on Thor for my own podcast.
Hiatus, yeah.
And then after that, there's a rabbi who's a fantastic commentator. He goes by Pop Culture Rabbi on TikTok. He and I did an episode on the theodicy of Thor and the theology of trying to kill gods. So, yeah, you all have put the Thor needle in me, and it's gone pretty deep, and I'm on the wagon now. I'm off the wagon. But yeah, I'm talking about podcasting. All the podcasting I do can be found at theethicalpanda.com. I have 2 podcasts. One of them is all about superhero ethics. We talk about all kind of questions like that. Everything from what does killing gods mean in the MCU to we did an episode on the concept of the frontier in American history and how Star Trek sort of interfaces with that, and the problems with that, and the good parts of that, and all that. And then my other podcast is called Star Wars Universe Podcast. And over there, as you can imagine, we do coverage of Star Wars stuff, and we talk, sometimes we'll get into more philosophical stuff, but we also do episode-by-episode coverage. And by the time this goes out, I think we'll probably be deep into our weekly episode coverage of Andor, a show that I'm really excited for, especially because it's going to be about
fun.
Kind of, that idea that war is a lot messier than you want to think it is, even when it's for the best of causes. And so you can check all those out on the Star Wars Universe podcast. And we're recording our episode. We're live streaming the recording of our episodes every Wednesday night at 7:30 p.m. Central Time. So 8:30 Eastern, 5:30 Pacific, Mountain, kick rocks, because there are rocks there. I love you, Mountain Time. I just make jokes about you because I never have a guest who's from the Mountain Time. But anyway, so all that is to say, go to theethicalpanda.com. You'll find all the podcasts. Go to twitch.tv/ZenMadman. Zen Madman is Paul, my frequent podcast host and partner in podcasting. And so his Twitch stream is where we do all that. And I just said that all very fast, so hopefully it'll be in the show notes for anyone who's not from New York City and can't understand why I'm speaking so fast to find it, theethicalpanda.com. And you can find me, The Ethical Panda, on TikTok and Twitter and Facebook.
We've got 4 more minutes, right?
We'll just cut that into 5 pieces. We'll have a little bit of that.
Listen, you're going to have some listeners who are like, oh, God, the social justice guy is back, and they're doing all the social justice rants. They're going to turn off the next 4 minutes, so I had to get it all in there.
Get it all in, right.
All right, well, we will be back tomorrow to find out what Jim Morita has to say to Dum Dum Dugan and talk more about everything going on in Minute 62. So that's it for today. Thanks as always, Pete.
Thank you, Andy. And I love you, Greenwich Mean Time.
Until next time, true believers.
Marvel Movie Minute is a production of True Story FM. Engineering by Andy Nelson. This season's music is Spread the News by Anthony Vega, and this season's show art is by Winston Yabo. Find the show at truestory.fm, and if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, consider doing that for this show.